This week, you might have seen a bombshell news story about one of Australia's most climate-conscious politicians. Zee Feed, the independent MP from Warringah in New South Wales, didn't declare a big donation that she had received from someone that the media was calling a millionaire coal investor. Here are some of the headlines on this story from the Sydney Morning Herald, who was the first to publish the news, SBS, The Guardian, The Australian, Sky News, and the Herald Sun. But can you actually take the headlines on this news story at face value? Here's what a little media literacy and a quick Google search revealed about the way this story in particular has been presented. First of all, who's this rich donor then? We find out in the second part of the SMH story, the donations came from a family trust, and the head of that family, the patriarch, is John Kinghorn. Now, if you're like me, I had no context for who John Kinghorn is until the third part of this article. He is the founder of Rams Home Loans, which is definitely not a coal mining business. He is also facing very serious tax evasion charges, which is super sus, but also not coal related. Then we finally get the intel. Kinghorn was a former investor and director in a company called Cascade Coal and Felix Resources, which was sold in 2009. And at the very bottom of the story, we see that Kinghorn was also the director of another coal company called White Energy for 3 years until 2013. Without knowing what other investments Kinghorn has, we'll just assume that those two companies are the reason why Sydney Morning Herald is calling him a coal investor. Now, Zee Feed's 2019 election campaign received about $1.1 million in donations. The total amount of $100,000 was split up into 8 smaller amounts and allocated to different members of the Kinghorn family, although it was paid in a single amount through that family trust. The question of whether Stegel and her team have done the right thing here, it is an important one. However, it's not the purpose of this video, so I'm just going to leave that for you to mull over in your own time. So here's the second question. Now that you know a little bit about John Kinghorn, would you personally call him a coal investor? Let's say you are out, you're at the pub, you meet John Kinghorn. Then later on, you're telling your friends about it. How would you describe him to your mates? John Kinghorn has been in the news a lot over the years, so we can compare the way the media described him in this week's headlines to the way that they usually write about him. For consistency, let's just stick with the Sydney Morning Herald, who have previously referred to Kinghorn as a millionaire businessman and a philanthropist, the founder of Rams Home Loans, and even a cancer donor. The labels and titles that the media gives people are so important because they can really change the way that a story sounds while still presenting all of the facts. In this case, Kinghorn has certainly been involved in the coal industry. He's made money from it, probably a lot of money. So it's not incorrect to label him that way. But is it the most accurate, the clearest way to represent him? To provide a little bit more context, think about whether you would consider John Kinghorn to be a coal investor in the same way as someone like Gina Rinehart or Andrew Forrest. Personally, for me, I think it's more accurate to refer to him as a businessman or an entrepreneur, something along those lines, which is what the media has called him in the past, and I kind of think many others feel the same. That brings us to why. Why did almost every headline choose to deliberately call Kinghorn a coal investor this week? It's pretty simple. News that is negative and unique gets more clicks. For a politician who's very passionate about climate action to have been influenced by a big-time mining magnate, that would be an outrageous story. It would be crazy. I'd click on that. We would probably all click on that story. But a headline that's closer to the truth would say something like, politician fails to disclose $100,000 donation from a very wealthy businessman. Now, that's not a positive story by any means, and Australia's political donation laws absolutely need to be changed ASAP. But it's definitely less dramatic and almost a little bit, yeah, so what? There is another interesting layer of political bias that we could explore too. I'm not surprised that some of the right-leaning news outlets like The Australian and Sky News and the Herald Sun have run with this coal angle because Zee is an independent, and as we've spoken about, she's very climate focused. Warringah is also traditionally a very liberal seat. By making her look bad, They are saying to their readers, don't trust these independents or climate conscious or non-conservative candidates. Don't vote for them in the upcoming election. But to tell you the truth, almost every news outlet that ran this story went with that same angle and that same headline, regardless of where they sit along the political spectrum. That was more surprising to me, but it just goes to show how important and powerful the clickability of these headlines is to all media outlets. They need you to click on the headline to make more money, so they run a more shocking angle because that's more likely to get the clicks. On that note, the only Australian publisher that doesn't rely on any advertising is the ABC, and they ran the most accurate headline for this story. It specifies that this was a family donation, not from one man, and it still highlights the juicy bit that there are links to the coal industry without implying that the money came from a huge mining magnate like Gina Rinehart. I'll be doing more media analysis on Zee Feed as we get closer to the election. So if you found this video helpful, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one, and maybe share this video with your smartest friend. I'm keen to hear your thoughts too, so let me know in the comments whether you think the headlines that we talked about this week were a bit of a stretch or totally fair.